Aristotle has always been considered to be one of the greatest, most influential, and profound philosophers, polymaths, and scientists of all time. He has exerted enormous influence and significance not only upon philosophy itself but also upon a vast and a wide array and range of subjects and branches of knowledge that changed knowledge itself forever, not only for the ancient times but also to the modern times as well. Aristotle remains relevant, important, significant, and paramount because of his unparalleled creations and undeniable contributions to not only philosophy but also logic, science, biology, zoology, metaphysics, politics, and so on and so forth. The influence of Aristotle is paramount and cannot be denied or neglected by anyone under any circumstances and situations, because Aristotle was arguably the first and the only thinker who sought and actually wanted to think in terms of logic, rationality, and practicality. He just did not believe in or promote ideals, beliefs, or ideas based on spirituality or metaphysical realities that cannot always be proved or evidenced, but he instead chose the path of practicality, observation, and experiment to basically more criticalize and rationalize his ideas so that his ideas and concepts could have a foundation in reasoning, criticality, science, and practicality, and not just dogma or ideals. So Aristotle still remains relevant because he is undeniably significant. He has had enormous consequences and significance through his philosophies and his other branches of knowledge that includes science, literature, politics, and so on and so forth. So Aristotle was arguably a Greek philosopher whose work profoundly shaped Western thought. His philosophy spans metaphysics, ethics, politics, logic, and natural sciences, emphasizing empirical observation and rational analysis. So now we're basically going to look at some of the key aspects of his fundamental philosophy. First, metaphysics and the theory of being. Four causes. Aristotle explained reality through four causes that answer why something exists. First, material cause, what something is made of. For example, a statue's marble. Formal cause, the form of something. Efficient cause, the agent or process that creates it. Final cause, the purpose or goal. Substance and essence. Substances, individual things like a tree or a person, are combinations of matter and form. The essence is the defining characteristic that makes something what it is. Actuality and potentiality. Things move from potentiality to actuality. For example, an acorn has the potential to become an oak tree. Meaning, first of all, there is substance and essence. Substance and essence are two key different ideas, and that means what is real may not have its reality on this planet but in some other dimension or realm. So the reality, the primary idea, and the primal characteristic of a thing can also be located or found in some other unknown, unexplored, unknowable dimension and realm that is inaccessible in itself. So that's how substance and essence works. And actuality and potentiality primarily talks about the potential of certain things to come into real and become actual, such as a tree sometimes remains small or little, but it has the potential to grow into something very large and incomprehensible. Now there is the prime mover. Aristotle posited an eternal, unchanging prime mover that initiates all motion and change without being moved itself, serving as the ultimate cause of the universe. So there is a prime mover at the center of everything and at the core of the universe, which is primarily responsible for the creation as well as the changing of anything and everything. But the mover does not itself change or does itself anything by itself, and that means the prime mover is the ultimate substance in the universe and in the midst of things that governs not only the things themselves but also moves them in arbitrary ways according to his own will, power, and desire. Now, the second key point in his fundamental philosophy is ethics, the Nicomachean ethics, eudaimonia. The ultimate goal of human life is eudaimonia, often translated as flourishing or the good life, achieved through living virtuously. So, in the ethics, the Nicomachean ethics, Aristotle first talks about the eudaimonia, which basically and essentially refers to the virtuous life or the good life, which can only be lived, attained, and materialized through the application of virtue into one's knowledge that translates into quality actions and quality behavior. So we cannot afford to live in accordance with our desires and basically selfish wants or self-centric aims that destroys virtue and knowledge themselves. Our knowledge has to have, and it has to be regulated by wisdom, intelligence, rationality, and the common goods. And obviously our knowledge has to have virtue about itself that compels us and pushes us to basically behave morally and to commit ourselves to everyone, to basically treat them virtuously and morally. So we have to commit ourselves to virtuous action and moral behavior under all circumstances and situations, and then only the good life will become possible, and we will also be able to live the good life and the virtuous life. And if we consistently focus on ourselves, the satisfaction of our self-centric goals and self-centered interests and the pursuit of possessions, wealth, fortune, money, then obviously we are being selfish and hedonistic, and obviously our life has no quality because it's a degradation and a moral decay. So we have to basically reduce our interests and basically moderate our desires and master our interests so that we can basically live with virtue and sacrifice and uphold our good morality and ideals in different challenging circumstances and difficult situations, both internal and societal and governmental. So that's how the eudaimonia, the good life, becomes possible. Now, the second point in Aristotelian ethics is virtue ethics. Virtue lies in the mean between extremes. For example, courage is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. So virtue is basically the moderator between extremes that allows us to basically produce and yield good qualities. Now, there is also an extreme in anger and an extreme in love or jealousy. So we have to moderate all these virtues and create honesty, understanding, and develop kindness, compassion towards the others instead of hatred or jealousy. And if we can do that, if we can actually rise ourselves above cowardice and recklessness by adopting virtue, then that becomes virtue ethics. Now, third, practical wisdom. Ethical decisions require practical wisdom to balance virtues and apply them contextually. So, ethical decisions actually have never been easy, and they translate into practical wisdom. So we have to have practical wisdom that is applicable to different real life challenges and real time circumstances that translates into ethical decisions that help us with relationships, friendships, and also to basically rectify our own problems, drawbacks, deficiencies, shortcomings, and allows us to improve upon and remove all of our problems in one way or another. So that's practical wisdom. Now, the lastly, function argument. Humans have a unique function, rational activity, and living according to reason leads to a fulfilling life. Meaning, the last point in the Nicomachean ethics is function argument. Humans basically have a unique function, that is rational activity, because we have mind and intellect within ourselves, which basically allows us to think and to reason, and also to commit reasonable action and behave reasonably. And we are also able to live in accordance with reason, and that leads to a fulfilling, virtuous life automatically. Now, the third fundamental pillar in his philosophy is logic. Aristotle founded formal logic, particularly through his work, Organon, his system of symbolic reasoning. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, laid the groundwork for deductive reasoning. He emphasized clear definitions and categories to organize knowledge. Fourth pillar in his philosophy is politics. Human nature and society. Humans are political animals, naturally suited for communal life. The state exists to promote the common good and enable eudaimonia. So, the first point in Aristotelian politics is human nature and society. So, humans, according to Aristotle, are basically essentially and fundamental political animals, and that means they have to live in a particular societal architecture, and if they're removed from society, then they're going to become and turn into lawless, dangerous animals and beasts that will threaten humanity and human existence itself. So we have to live a communal life. We have to live in a community, in a society, for our mental, emotional, and psychological well-being, and also for our potential to fulfill. And the state basically is the enabler of the rights to expression, speech, religion, and so on and so forth. And the state is also the enabler of the eudaimonia, or the virtuous life itself. Forms of government. Aristotle classified governments into three good forms: monarchy, aristocracy, polity, and three corrupt forms: tyranny, oligarchy, democracy. He favored a mixed government balancing elements of each, meaning Aristotle basically divided government into six distinct and different types. His first classification of governments are monarchy, aristocracy, and polity, and basically three corrupt forms are tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy. And he advocated for a government which was neither democracy nor tyranny, neither aristocracy nor oligarchy, but the one that balances basically politics and law with virtue, ethics, and morality. So the government actually has to allow to exercise our individual differences and indifferences, and to live in accordance with our virtues, decisions, choices, wisdom, intelligence, and so on and so forth. Now, the next point in Aristotelian politics is justice. Justice is central to political life, encompassing fairness and the distribution of goods according to merit. Justice has always been fundamental and indispensable to politics and to the state and the human life as well, because it allows for the distinction between fairness and evil to take place, and basically it punishes evil and rewards the virtuous and the good. Now, the fifth pillar in his philosophy is natural philosophy and science. Aristotle's empirical approach involved observing nature to understand its principles. His works like Physics and On the Soul explored motion, change, and living beings. Biology, he classified animals and studied their behaviors, laying foundations for zoology. Cosmology, he proposed a geocentric universe with concentric spheres, each moved by a divine intelligence, influencing medieval thought. Now, the sixth pillar in his philosophy is aesthetics and poetics. In poetics, Aristotle analyzed art, particularly tragedy, as an imitation or mimesis of human action. Tragedy evokes catharsis, emotional purification through pity and fear. So in poetics, Aristotle has particularly talked about literature and art, and he referred to tragedy as the direct representation or imitation of real-time human actions that obviously lead to sometimes good or bad consequences, and that manifest good, evil, anger, jealousy, hatred, suffering, sorrow, and so on and so forth, including regret, remorse, embarrassment, etc. So human actions are basically portrayed and represented in the tragedy, which is a branch of literature itself. So a tragical event or a drama is nothing more than the representation of real-life human actions that sometimes lead to the creation of self-imposed or external suffering, sorrow, sadness, despair, frustration, ignorance, that leads to downfall, and so on and so forth, and that eventually basically creates the feeling of total purification and vindication of the soul, such as regret, kindness, understanding, empathy, and so on and so forth. Art serves as a cognitive purpose, revealing universal truths about human experience. Key characteristics of Aristotle's philosophy: empiricism and observation. Unlike Plato, who emphasized ideal forms, Aristotle grounded his philosophy in the observable world. So, Aristotle's philosophy was primarily and fundamentally different from Plato's philosophy, because whereas Plato focused on ideals and the infinite and the metaphysical realms that cannot be accessed, recognized, or understood, Aristotle centered his philosophy and based it upon the materialistic world and the limited space in which we live and of which we're all parts. He basically said that all things, good, evil, beauty, tyranny, mystery, exist in the same world and at the same time, and not in some other space, realm, or world as emphasized by Plato. Aristotle prioritizes and emphasizes practicality, observation, and experimentation in his philosophy, science, politics, and the other branches of knowledge. Teleology: everything has a purpose or end goal that explains its existence and behavior. So Aristotle basically, besides talking about empiricism and observation in his key philosophy, also talked about teleology. Now, according to teleology, everything basically has a purpose, an aim, an end for which the thing exists and ultimately completes itself and basically does something good to the all of humanity. So everything has an end in itself without dependence on anything or anyone. That itself explains its existence and behavior. Systematic approach. Aristotle's work is highly systematic, organizing knowledge into distinct disciplines. So Aristotle's work has organization, discipline, and moderation to itself that Plato's and Socrates' works lacked. Aristotle primarily focused on and emphasized observation and science and daily life experimentation, and that's why his philosophy is so highly systematic and organized and symmetrical. Now, lastly, influence and legacy of Aristotelian philosophy. Aristotle's ideas influenced medieval scholasticism, Islamic philosophy, and modern science. His emphasis on reason, ethics, and empirical study remains foundational in philosophy, science, and political theory. So that's how we have looked and tried to understand, comprehend, and decipher Aristotle and basically his key philosophies and important areas of study and knowledge that he created and invented by himself on the basis of his own wisdom, intelligence, observation, practicality, reasoning, basically separating himself from ideas and idealism. So that's a basically brief analysis and explanation of Aristotle's philosophies and his also different branches of knowledge and ideas that he explored by himself.